Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This is the verbatim federal courtroom testimony of the Sean Diddy Combs trial. As reported by Inner City Press, the courtroom went silent as a new name was unexpectedly called to the stand. Jada Pinkett Smith, the actress, entrepreneur, and wife of Will Smith, took a deep breath before facing the jury. What she was about to reveal wasn't just surprising, it was chilling. She claimed that back in 2004 Diddy invited her to a private meeting where he presented her with a document called a loyalty agreement. It wasn't a contract, it wasn't a partnership, it was something darker, a disturbing pact of silence and compliance. And when she refused to sign it, she said Diddy looked her dead in the eye and warned her, "You'll regret it in the next life." The testimony sent shock waves through the courtroom. Now the truth behind the loyalty agreement, and the reason she stayed silent for so long, is finally coming to light. The atmosphere in the courtroom was already tense when the bailiff called out an unexpected name. Jada Pinkett Smith. Gasps rippled through the room. Even the prosecution seemed momentarily stunned, suggesting this witness was a last-minute addition, perhaps even a personal decision by Jada herself. She entered the courtroom dressed in a subdued black suit, her face unreadable, but the eyes of everyone in the room locked onto her as she stepped up to the witness stand and placed her hand on the Bible. "I understand this is unusual," she began, "but I can't stay silent anymore." What followed would become one of the most shocking moments of the trial. Jada Pinkett Smith, known to the world for her acting, activism, and openness, now claimed she had a deeply buried secret, a story she had held close to her chest for nearly 2 decades, and it involved an alleged loyalty pact. Diddy had once tried to get her to sign. Jada told the court she had been watching the trial in private, following every detail. She had heard names of women assistants and collaborators who had described moments of coercion, strange documents, and veiled threats. It was then that something shifted in her. She realized the document she had once been offered, something she had dismissed as just creepy Diddy behavior, might actually be part of a much larger, darker system. "I don't need protection anymore," she said. "What I need is to tell the truth, because back then I saw the tip of something I didn't understand, but now I see the whole iceberg." Diddy stared at her from the defense table, visibly shaken. He hadn't expected this, neither had his attorneys, who immediately asked the judge to dismiss her testimony on the grounds of irrelevance. But the judge allowed it, saying if what she says aligns with other testimonies, it could speak to a pattern. Jada steeled herself, took a deep breath, and launched into the story that would make headlines around the world, starting with the day she met with Diddy alone in 2004, and was presented with what he allegedly called a spiritual agreement. Jada said the meeting took place in a quiet, high-end suite at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. She had been invited there under the pretense of discussing a potential philanthropic collaboration, something involving music, activism, and community development. "It sounded normal," she said. "It sounded like something Diddy would pitch." When she arrived, Diddy was alone, dressed in all white, playing jazz through a small Bose speaker. The curtains were drawn, the lights dimmed. He poured her a glass of champagne. She declined. He was calm, weirdly calm, she said, like he had rehearsed the whole thing. After a few minutes of small talk, he excused himself and walked to the room's small bar. From behind it, he pulled out a black leather folder and handed it to her without a word. "I thought it was a pitch deck or a contract," she told the court, "but it wasn't. It was labeled loyalty agreement." At first Jada thought it was a joke. She even laughed nervously and said, "What is this, some kind of hip-hop Scientology thing?" But Diddy didn't laugh. He just nodded slowly and said, "It's protection for both of us." Inside the folder was a typed document, roughly 7 pages long. Jada said it had no legal letterhead, no indication that it came from a law firm, yet it was terrifying in its tone. She described clauses that demanded eternal discretion regarding all matters, personal and professional, phrases that referenced alignment with the inner circle, and more disturbingly, submission of the soul to the greater good of the legacy. There were parts of it that didn't even sound human, she said. It felt ancient, like a pact. She claimed the document included vague references to unnamed individuals, ritualistic expectations, and penalties for betrayal. It didn't ask for money or creative rights. It asked for silence, obedience, compliance, forever. At the end there was a signature line with her name already typed below it. "I felt sick. I felt like I was being recruited for something I didn't understand." She handed it back and said no. That's when she says Diddy's tone changed. Jada began reading sections of the document aloud in court, or rather paraphrasing them. The original, she said, had mysteriously disappeared from her home years ago, but she remembered entire phrases by heart. "That's how much it haunted me," she told the jury. One clause stated the undersigned agrees to uphold confidentiality not only in this life but in all spiritual Transitions thereafter another included the line, "Any knowledge gained in sacred space shall remain sacred, never to be uttered in earthly court, church, or public sphere," Jada said. She remembered laughing nervously when she first read that. "I said, are you telling me this contract follows me after I die?" And Diddy looked me in the eye and said, "You're starting to get it." Other elements described a hierarchy of silence levels of information that could only be unlocked through demonstrations of loyalty. There were references to tests, gatherings, and the phrase "the selection," which appeared 3 times but was never defined. One part read, "To break silence is to break the bond. Breaking the bond carries consequences divine." And otherwise, at this point the courtroom was silent. Some jurors looked unsettled. A few spectators were visibly shaken. Jada emphasized that she was not under the influence of any substance that day, nor was she exaggerating for drama. This was real. This wasn't a prank. It wasn't a publicity stunt. He fully believed in this document, and he believed I would eventually sign it. She didn't, and that's when she said Diddy gave her the infamous warning, one that still makes her tremble: "You'll regret it in the next life." That moment would stay with her for years, and though she walked away from the meeting that day, she felt as if something had followed her ever since. After Jada refused to sign the so-called loyalty agreement, she described a shift in the room's energy that felt almost spiritual, and not in a good way. The music stopped. Diddy's expression darkened, and he leaned forward, no longer playful or mysterious. His voice became low and slow, like he was reciting something he had said before. "He looked at me and said, 'You'll regret it in the next life, not this one.'" The next period, Jada clarified to the jury that she didn't know if he was threatening her with physical harm or speaking in metaphysical terms. It felt like a curse, she said, like he believed he had the power to reach into something eternal. The court went silent again. The prosecutor asked if she had taken that threat seriously. Jada responded without hesitation, "Absolutely, because it wasn't a joke to him, and suddenly it wasn't a joke to me." Diddy didn't just warn her, he began listing what would happen if she went against the current. He warned that roles would dry up, projects would mysteriously fall apart, certain producers would no longer return her calls, people in her life might distance themselves for their own safety. "He didn't raise his voice, he didn't even touch me, but it was the scariest moment I've had in Hollywood," she said. Then she said he smiled again, that same rehearsed smug grin, and told her, "Just think it over, you'll see. Everyone always comes back." Jada left the hotel suite immediately. She didn't say goodbye, she didn't look back, but she remembered walking to her car and realizing she was shaking so hard she couldn't put the key in the ignition. "I had seen a side of him that I wasn't supposed to see," she said, "and that's when I knew whatever this thing is that he's running, it's bigger than just parties and rumors." After her terrifying encounter in 2004, Jada made the decision to stay quiet, not because she was complicit, but because she was afraid. She admitted on the stand that for years she carried that fear like a shadow that followed her everywhere. She'd walk into events and wonder who else had been approached with the same agreement. She started scanning rooms, searching for subtle signs, the same folder, the same phrase, that same hollow look she had seen in Diddy's eyes that day. She also began noticing the pattern. Certain women who once had promising careers vanished, some became silent, never giving interviews again, others stayed in Diddy's orbit despite clearly being uncomfortable in photos or videos. It was like they were trapped in something they couldn't speak about, Jada said. "And I realized I had just barely escaped, but escaping didn't mean peace." She told the courtroom about recurring nightmares, about the strange feeling of being watched, about moments when her phone would ring, no caller ID, and the voice on the other end would say nothing, "Just breathe." She began journaling, trying to make sense of it. Eventually she burned the journal out of fear it might be found. "I didn't even tell Will," she confessed, "not for years. I couldn't explain it. I didn't want him to think I was being paranoid. But it all came back the moment this trial began, when she heard former assistants and dancers testify about NDAs, coercion, veiled threats, and strange spiritual language. It was like hearing an echo from her past. That's when I knew it wasn't just me. That's when I realized I wasn't crazy. He was doing this to everyone." The decision to testify wasn't easy. She knew it would reopen wounds, attract media attention, and possibly place her in danger again. But this time, she said, the silence felt heavier than the risk. "I used to think staying quiet would protect me," she told the jury. "Now I know silence is what protects him." What came next wasn't just emotional, it was damning. The prosecution brought forward 2 additional loyalty agreements recovered during investigations into Diddy's former employees and partners. The documents, though different in format and language, mirrored the bizarre elements of Jada's testimony with disturbing accuracy. One document came from a former assistant who claimed she was forced to sign after repeatedly refusing to cover up details of Diddy's alleged illicit activities. The other was from a young artist whose contract included clauses about spiritual submission and the eternal legacy code. The prosecutor laid the documents side by side with Jada's memory prompting experts in contract law and cult behavior to testify. These experts noted that while the agreements had no legal standing, they contained psychological coercion tactics, often seen in cult recruitment and control. They showed how such language and threats could trap individuals in cycles of fear and loyalty. The court also heard from former industry insiders who spoke anonymously, describing an invisible network of influence Diddy had allegedly cultivated not only through music and media but through secret societies and ritual gatherings that blurred lines between power and mysticism. These insiders described how the loyalty agreement functioned as a gatekeeping tool, a method of keeping control and obedience, while maintaining a veil of plausible deniability. The prosecutor asked Jada if she had experienced any intimidation since she decided to come forward. The witness nodded slowly. The intimidation had escalated after her interview with a major news outlet went viral. Anonymous calls in the dead of night, strange men parked outside her house for hours, and a threatening note left on her car windshield that read, "The Watcher sees you." She handed the note to the court clerk. The handwriting was eerily similar to the signature in the loyalty agreement. The judge ordered a recess as murmurs filled the courtroom. The defense team argued that Jada was mistaken, hallucinating, even fabricating the story to damage Diddy, but the jury seemed absorbed in the testimony. The air was thick with tension. The prosecution wrapped up by reminding the jury that this was more than just a trial about contracts or celebrity behavior. It was about unmasking a culture of control, coercion, and fear hiding in plain sight in one of the world's biggest entertainment empires. They called it the legacy. And now, for the first time, the public was seeing the cracks in its foundation. As Jada left the stand, reporters swarmed her asking for comment. She paused and said, "This isn't about revenge, it's about truth. If we don't speak up, nothing changes, nothing stops." And as she disappeared behind the courthouse doors, the words lingered. "The Watcher sees you. The eye sees always, even in silence." Even after death, the courtroom was silent, but the world outside was waking up to a secret long buried in the shadows. And as the trial moved into its next phase, everyone wondered who else might be brave enough to tell their story, who else would break the silence, because once the truth starts to surface, it doesn't stop until the legacy falls.